What's going on, everyone? Thank you for tuning into a very, very special Find Your Voice episode, a live episode. And the introduction there just told you a little bit about myself, but I forgot to mention my co-host, Jen Atwell. So both of us will be running this show. I just want to, before I start, and introduce you to the guests on this show, which are going to be absolutely incredible. You probably heard me speak about them many times. I just thought this would be a good way to just give you an indication about what Find Your Voice is, if that's okay. So one of the reasons I thought this right now, being live in where we are in the world right now, would be important is because we've all had some level of adversity in our life. And many of us, especially in the last 3 weeks, 3 months, sorry, we've suffered with some setbacks. So bringing something like this forward to you guys live, I want to try and inspire hope and make you recognize from these incredible guests that we have lined up that irregardless of the cards that you've been dealt in life, there is always a way out. There is always hope at the end of it. And I suppose that's kind of like the underlying theme behind Find Your Voice. So Find Your Voice in terms of the podcast, it started for three reasons. The first was I wanted it to act as a metaphor for a way of life, for almost like a self-awareness journey. And more importantly, it was kind of like a selfish pursuit of trying to find myself, my own journey. You see, I grew up thinking I was doing everything that I needed to do. I got the education, I got the degree, I got the master's, and I still kind of felt a little bit unfulfilled. So there was that selfish pursuit. The second reason I started it was because, as many of you know, I am 9 times out of 10 an anxious mess. I've suffered with anxiety a lot of my life. I was a very, very shy person, to the point I've had some beautiful messages from some people recently saying, I can't believe you put yourself out on camera and you do all this stuff now. But it's been a process, and that process has been helped along so much by the guests that I have on this show and the guests also that can't be with us today. And then finally, which I think is the most important reason, is I wanted it to be a platform for people who don't have a voice, for people out there who may not necessarily feel like their story is worth sharing. And I believe every single person's story is worth sharing, whether it's a particular chapter or whether it's the whole thing. And I always wanted to be an advocate for that. I've tried to be an advocate for children in the care system. That's part of my personal life. And I wanted to kind of bring that to the forefront and let people know, such as your Kathys of the world, your Beps, your Michaels, who are already in their own right doing incredible. But I wanted them to have another platform to show my listeners, look at these people. These people are absolutely incredible. So that's kind of a little bit about that. It was a solely passion project and a bit of a challenge to myself. Can I overcome this anxiety? And can I be that person who not only advocates for people to change and follow their dreams and do whatever they want to do, but I need to do that myself. So I wanted to lead from the front. And as a result of that, we have over 140,000 downloads as of today. And that's been across 50 countries, which I can't even believe they understand my accent across 50 countries, but that's absolutely fantastic. We've been in the top 20 within the UK. We hit the news and noteworthy for 3 weeks in iTunes. We were in the top 5 in Canada, Egypt, and there was another country, and I'm going to kick myself because I can't remember it right now. But I think more importantly than all of that is, I sincerely believe it's helped people. It's helped people from the messages I've received. It's helped me. Like, it's honestly helped me find my voice and do what I'm doing now. And I don't think there's a better gift than that. I don't think there's a better gift I can personally share in the world than hope and inspiration. And that comes through the guests who are part of my Find Your Voice family. So in terms of going live that way, this was an idea by the co-host Jen Atwell, who was actually episode number 2. So he's part of the pilot show. And Jen gave me this idea, and it's weird. And Kathy, correct me later on if I'm wrong here, but I'm sure I had a conversation with you about my desire to have a kind of Oprah Winfrey show where I just have great stories to just inspire hope with the world. And here we are. This is kind of the next best thing while we're all in lockdown or getting over our adversity. And it was Jin's idea, and then we collabed together, and this is kind of what we put together. So there is nobody else I'd rather share the stage with than Jin, because Jin is actually now an international speaker. He's successful. I'm sure he's going to tell you all of that now. So I'm going to pass this over to Jin, but I just want to sincerely thank every single person who's taken time out of their day to come on, and hopefully you're going to find some incredible value. So over to Jin.
Thank you, Aaron. That was a great start. Well done. So a bit about me. So I met Aaron about 3 years ago, and we met him at a property event, nothing to relate to what we do now and what we're doing now in this event. And the reason we connected was because we both want to do more to help other people. So Aaron was on his journey, and I was on a personal journey of my own, and we both connected with because of that journey that we were both going on. During that period, I had a lot going on in my life. Just after I met Aaron, I lost my sister and had a number of other things going on, and it just knocked me for six basically. And Aaron allowed me to share my story on his podcast in January last year, and that was the beginning of me beginning to tell my journey and tell my story to others. I then went on to do some other things, and I did some speaking. I believe that I wanted to learn how to communicate better, to communicate my story better. So I went on to do stuff like Toastmasters, which helps people improve their communication skills. So that allowed me to then find my voice even more and communicate my story to a wider audience. So that's the kind of things I've been doing since I've met Aaron. I did enter, as Aaron said, I did enter a competition not so long ago and came second in the UK and Ireland for a speaking contest, sharing my story about my sister and my last message, the last message that my sister gave to me. The other things I'm doing, I do something called magical mornings. So I've always wanted to help younger children. I didn't have a great childhood myself. I had lots going on, and I always made a promise to myself that one day I'd help young children as well. And the way I wanted to do that is by teaching them what I learned late in my 30s, and that was about mindset and self-development. And I thought I only wish I knew these things as a child. So I created a package called Magical Mornings, a coaching program, where I go into primary schools and I work with children on a daily basis, doing a 15-minute routine, helping them work on their mindset. So not just their physical health, but also their mental health. So we start off doing things like meditation, we do yoga, we do affirmations, we do gratitude. So we have a routine where we just work on our body and mind every single day. And I work with children from the age of 5 up to the age of 12. And I've seen a massive difference in these children telling me what they're grateful for, what they appreciate in life. And it's an amazing journey for me and very rewarding seeing these children being able to have the tools to work on their body and mind every single day. And I hope to take that into their adult life as well. So it's been an amazing journey. That's the kind of things I've been doing. I'm also trying to do something now for public speaking for kids. So it's called Magical Speaking, where I can help children then build the confidence to tell their stories and have the communication and leadership skills that I think are essential in life, that I kind of lacked as well to some degree until later in life. That's a bit about me. I'm sure there'll be some point where I probably will be sharing my story on Aaron's on this live event as well. So I won't go too much into detail. It's not my night tonight. So we've got 3 people that are going to tell you some amazing stories, and I want to hand over to them now for them to continue. But just before I do that, a couple of house rules. So if you can all stay on mute during the show, you will give you the chance to unmute after everybody finishes their speech, so you can give them a round of applause. I know some people like to do jazz hands, but I think it's nicer when we take yourselves off mute and everybody can hear everybody actually clapping, because it feels like a real show then, and that's what we want to recreate. We want to create that feel of a real show where people are coming on stage telling their story and we're all there getting inspired with them and clapping them and giving them a round of applause afterwards. So feel free after the speech to give them all a round of applause and come off mute. If you all can leave your cameras on, that'd be great. Again, it just feels like more of a show when everybody's got their cameras on. There's nothing worse than when you're doing a speech on Zoom and everybody's got their black screens on and you just feel like you're talking to yourself. So if you can leave your cameras on, that'll be amazing, so we can feel like we're really there. The other thing I'd like to say is, was any other house rules? This is a free event, but if you can, we're doing this in support of Young Minds, which is a charity that supports young children with mental health issues. We're very close to myself and Aaron. There's a link in the messages. So if you can sponsor a charity, that'd be great. No pressure if you don't. If you do like the show, that'd be great if you can. If you've got any questions, if you have any questions during the show, we'll please ask you to put them in the messages. And then at the end of everybody's speech, I'll look at the messages and I'll ask your questions to any of the guests that have spoken on the night. There'll also be an opportunity at the end for us to ask some questions if we do run over time. With that, I'll hand over to Aaron. Thank you.
Thank you, Jin. Thank you. So the first guest, who is this handsome man on this side, is Michael Taylor. Now, Michael Taylor was one of the first interviews. It was episode number 40, where I thought, wow, in terms of my own level of personal development, I recognize there was so much more I needed to learn. And the word wisdom comes to mind when I always think of Michael Taylor. And I remember even the wife, it was one of the first episodes where I didn't have to push the wife to listen to it. And she had listened to it and come back and she was like, wow, he's absolutely incredible. So he's taught me a lot in just a short amount of time. So he was definitely going to be one of the first people I wanted to bring on this show to teach you. But Michael's story, which you're going to hear a little bit about now, is about healing and it's about overcoming adversity. And the major takeaway I took from Michael with all his wisdom and everything he shared in that episode was that if you want something bad enough, there's no one that can stop you but yourself. So we have to do the work ourselves. And hopefully he'll translate that in this message. If not, please do check out episode number 40. But without further ado, I'd like to welcome Michael to the show.
All right, Aaron. So first of all, let me acknowledge you because I remember that interview very vividly. And I also remember your fear and apprehension about being on camera. And now I see you doing this, and I'm so proud of you, dude, for just really moving forward and moving through your fears and anxiety and doing this. And man, you're really rocking it. So I acknowledge you for that. So I want to begin with a little story. You see, once upon a time, there was a mystical master, and he was teaching or training a student about enlightenment. And so they set up a chair at the front of the city, and they were sitting there, and all of a sudden a car pulls up, and the couple reaches over to the master and says, hey, look, we're thinking about moving into your city, and we were curious about what type of people live here. And so the master looked at the couple and he said, well, tell me a little bit about the people from where you came. And they said, well, the people from our city were really friendly and nice, and we really loved living there, but we have to move because of our jobs. And the master says, great, because the people here are just like that. They're friendly and nice, so I'm sure you'll be happy. So the couple moves into the city. A few minutes later, another couple pulls up. They look out the window and they said, hey, we're thinking about coming to your city, and we're wondering what type of people are in your city. The master looks at them. He says, well, tell me about the people from your city. And the couple says, well, they're kind of nasty and angry, and we really wanted to leave the city. That's why we're moving. And the master says, well, people like that are in this city also. So the couple drives away. So the student looks at the master and he says, master, why did you lie to that second couple? The master said, I didn't lie. He says, this is your first lesson for enlightenment. He says, your beliefs about a thing will create your experience of that thing. So the first couple believed that people were friendly, and that's the type of people they would have found in this city. The second couple believed that people were angry. They would have found the same type of people here. So your lesson is to understand your beliefs create your reality. Your beliefs about a thing create your experience of that thing. And so I share that story because as you look at our world today, it appears that the world is in total chaos. A lot of people believe that. I personally have a different perspective because I believe that I create my own reality, and I believe that my beliefs about the world creates my experience of it. And so my experience of the world is one of joy, passion, excitement, expectancy. And at the same time, I do not deny that there are tons of challenges in the world. But I also believe there's never been a better time to be alive on the planet than right now. Now, there's a couple of reasons for my optimism. First and foremost is I believe there is a divine intelligence that created and is still creating this amazing universe that we live in. And every human being has access to this divine intelligence. You can call it whatever you want to call it. You can call it God, you can call it Jesus. I don't think the name matters, but what matters is you create an intimacy and connection with it. And when you do, nothing will be impossible for you. So with that being said, I wanted to kind of share my little backstory because I was born in the inner city projects of Corpus Christi, Texas, to a single mom with 6 kids. And we were basically the poster children for poverty back in the 60s. And when I was 6 years old, I had a sister who got extremely ill. And my mom had to take me to live with my dad, who I really didn't know because he had left when I was very young. And when she took me to live with him, he was actually living with his mother, who was my grandmother. And I call her the grandmother from hell. And so for 7 years, from 6 to 13, I was in this hellhole with this particular woman who actually hated me, believe it or not. And I experienced every imaginable type of abuse you can imagine. So I want you to try to imagine the worst childhood a child could have, multiply that by 10. That was my childhood. And so for 7 years, I was exposed to traumas that I don't even want to go into detail. After 7 years, I was reunited with my mom. And I was 14 years old. And I decided that, I wanted to live a dream. And that dream was, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I ended up getting my first job at 14, started my first company, started climbing the corporate ladder. I got to high school, started a couple of companies there. And when I was 18, I went to this seminar, and this guy convinced me that I could get rich selling vacuum cleaners. And so I dropped out of high school to pursue this dream of getting rich by selling vacuum cleaners, which was a really poor choice. But fortunately for me, even though I never sold a single vacuum cleaner, I learned that it's okay to take risk in life. And taking that risk, even though it didn't work out the way that I wanted, it taught me that I could take risk and accept the consequences of those risks. Well, the good news is, even though I didn't sell any vacuum cleaners, I got a job with this building supply center. And I worked extremely hard. I climbed the corporate ladder. And at the age of 22, I was living the American dream. I had the house, the wife, the 2.5 kids, and all of that. And by society standards, I was pretty successful. And then within approximately a 6.5-year time frame, that American dream turned into an American nightmare as I went through a divorce, a bankruptcy, a foreclosure, a deep, deep state of depression. I was actually homeless for 2 years, living out of my car. And, it was an interesting time to say the least, but during the darkest period of my life, I received a miracle. I was sitting up late one night because I was too depressed to sleep. And I was sitting at the edge of my bed, looking across the room at my bookshelf, when I happened to notice that every book on my bookshelf had something to do with getting rich or making money. And as I looked at those books, this question just popped in my head. Michael, what if you took all the energy and effort you've used in trying to get rich and simply figure out how to be happy? And as simplistic as that question sounds, it literally changed and saved my life in an instant. Something in me shifted, and all of a sudden my depression lifted, and I had this amazing clarity that I was going to be able to rebuild my life, and it was going to become extraordinary. So as a result of asking that question, I stopped reading books on getting rich and making money. And I started reading books on psychology and philosophy and spirituality and metaphysics and personal development. And I went on this deep, deep dive to self. And so after a couple of years, I was able to start rebuilding my life. And things obviously got better. And I started working with Anthony Robbins, the motivational speaker you may be familiar with. And I did his fire walk, and I was all hyped up and motivated. But after a couple of years, I recognized that something was still missing that I couldn't really put my finger on. Because once again, I was somewhat successful, but there was, I'd almost call it an emptiness in me that I couldn't quite figure out. And then I read a book by a guy named John Bradshaw. And in this book, John Bradshaw mentioned that he was talking about emotional healing. And he made the comment that the only way to heal emotionally was to create what he called an interpersonal bridge with another human being. And as I read that, I recognized that doing the Anthony Robbins stuff kept me motivated, but I really hadn't connected with people. And so as a result of reading John Bradshaw's book, I recognized that, I needed to figure out how to create this bridge. And one way that he said to do that was to go to therapy. Now, obviously in our society and culture, especially for men, we have this really negative stigma about saying, I need help. As a matter of fact, I'll assert that for most men, those are the 3 most difficult words a man will ever say. But I gained the courage to say, I need help. And I decided to go to therapy. And so I go to therapy, and it opened up a whole new world for me. And as mentioned, I had always been highly motivated, but I really didn't know what was driving that motivation. Well, I had another miracle that occurred during therapy, because I was talking to the therapist and she asked me to share some of the things that I went through as a kid. And so I started sharing some of the traumas and some of the abuses that I went through. And as I was sharing with her, I had this huge smile on my face. And so the therapist looked at me and she says, Michael, why are you smiling? She said, those are terrible things. Those are horrible things. No child should have, gone through that sort of stuff. And so my defense mechanism was, I'm great. I made it. And I was in this complete denial stage. But then she said something that really changed my world. She said, Michael, let me ask you this. How would you feel if those same things happened to your son? And in asking me that question, it's like I got out of my head, I went into my heart, and I allowed myself to feel for the first time all that suppressed and repressed trauma from my childhood. And all of a sudden, I just burst into tears, and I started to feel that pain. I felt it for maybe 10 seconds, but then I went back in my head and I said, wait, what did you just do to me? And I started trying to rationalize it in my head, what had just happened. And I said, tell me what you just did. As a matter of fact, I got pissed at her. I said, how did you do that? And she says, Michael, I didn't do anything. She said, here's the thing. The only way out is through. You must be willing to go through that pain, because right now you are in a lot of pain. And you've got to be willing to confront that pain in order to move through it. And so I kind of surrendered and I said, okay, I think I get it. I stopped trying to analyze it. I said, okay, I'm willing. I said, whatever it takes, because I remember what John Bradshaw had said about, this creating this interpersonal bridge. And all of a sudden I had created this trust with this person. And I said, look, I'm going to trust you to guide me through this. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes. So I went to several sessions of therapy, and all of a sudden my life began to change. I started to heal, and I started to grow. I started to recognize, things are a lot better than I'd ever imagined they could be. And then the therapist says, I've done all I can do for you right now. So what I'm suggesting is that you join a group, and she had put together a group of people to help continue that growth and healing journey. She says, because she says, you've had so many major breakthroughs, you're now ready to move to a different environment where you can really be supported. Well, I wasn't ready for that. I was just difficult enough being that vulnerable in front of one person, but in front of a whole group, man, I just wasn't ready to deal with that. So I said, look, I appreciate it, but I'll pass. I'm healed, I'm fixed, I don't need you anymore, thank you very much. And I left. Now, I was in complete denial. I was just not willing to deal with that pain yet. Well, a year or so went by, and I read another book by John Bradshaw called Healing the Shame That Binds You. And when I read that book, ding, 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 the lights started going off again. Because in that book, what he talked about was what he called toxic shame. And so as a result of that traumatic childhood that I went through, I was driven by this sense of I'm not good enough. And so the way to try to compensate for that, I became very successful. I became very smart because I was so ashamed inside, internally. And so it just so happened that John Bradshaw, who was from Houston, happened to have a center here in Houston where he did what he called inner child workshops. And so I knew that I needed to go and do one of these workshops. And so it was a 3-day weekend. And in this weekend, I addressed all of that trauma from my childhood. There was sexual abuse, there was rape, there was violence. I mean, it was awful. But in this process, I allowed myself to feel and heal all that suppressed pain. And as a result of that 3-day weekend, I truly became free. I got to a point where I was able to love myself and forgive myself for all the years that I felt so inadequate and trying to prove myself to other people and to gain other people's approval. I was able to let all of that go. And so in healing that, it freed me to be who I truly am as a human being. Now, I firmly believe that everything in our lives happens for a reason. I also believe that every adversity brings us a gift and a lesson if we're willing to look deeply enough. So as I reflect back over my life and I think about my divorce and how painful and how difficult it was the absolute best thing that ever happened to me, because it challenged me for the first time to stop looking outside of myself for answers and to look within. And there's a wonderful saying that I love that says, if you don't go within, you will always go without. And so if you aren't willing to go within to deal with your issues, your stuff, you will go without the joy and the understanding of who you are as a human being. And so that divorce, like I said, it was the catapult for me to become the person I was born to be. You see, I never dreamed of being a writer or a speaker. And if I would have not listened to that voice inside of me that said, you need to change, and if I wouldn't have went through my divorce, I would probably still be stuck in some corporate job and absolutely miserable. But as a result of going through all of those challenges, I discovered some unique gifts and talents that I have. The gift of speaking, the gift of writing, the gift of inspiring people. So I know now that I am on purpose. I know exactly why I was put here on the planet, and it lights me up inside every day to wake up knowing that I can share my unique gifts and talents with the world. So how much time do I have left? I don't want to overgo. Where am I on time? Can you tell me, Aaron?
You still got some time. You've got about 5 minutes if you want to.
About 5 minutes, great. Okay. All right, so I say all of that to share. I want to share a couple of tips that have allowed me to overcome all those adversities that I just mentioned. Because again, as human beings, we all experience adversity. So here are 5 keys that I want you to think about as you may be dealing with the challenges in your life. And these are what I call the 5 keys to turning your adversities into allies. So key number 1, you must be willing to take 100% responsibility for your life. Boom. You can't point fingers and place blame on your parents, on your race, on your age, on your educational level, or the country. You have to take 100% responsibility for your life. Once you do that, you lay the foundation for changing your life. That's the first thing you have to do. The second thing you have to do is you have to be willing to get out of your comfort zone. And this is the challenge that most of us deal with because we don't like being uncomfortable. It's human nature to stay comfortable. But we have to understand that if it doesn't challenge you, it can't change you. So whatever you're going through, understand that the challenge, that adversity is there to challenge you to change, to transform. So you must be willing to get out of your comfort zone, no matter how difficult it might be. Number 3, you must commit to your own growth. And I love what Anthony Robbins says. He says you must commit to CANI, C-A-N-I, which is constant and never-ending improvement. And so we have to commit to constant and never-ending improvement, expanding our mind, changing our ideas and beliefs about ourselves and the world around us. Commit to your own growth and make it a lifelong journey. There's no destination. It's just a journey. So stay on a journey of constant and continuous improvement in your life. Number 4, You must develop a positive mental attitude. Now, in the little story that I shared at the beginning, the one couple that came in and they saw the world as angry and judgmental, well, see, that's their attitude. So that attitude is going to be projected out into the world, and it's going to keep showing up until they change their attitudes. So it's important that you develop a positive mental attitude. And that usually will come as a result of you doing your inner work and committed to your growth. Because when we do our inner work and grow, I can assure you, you will create a positive mental attitude once you remove all the traumas and things that are keeping you from accessing who you really are. And last but definitely not least, to turn your adversities into allies, you must discover your unique gifts and talents. Every human being shows up with unique gifts and talents. As a matter of fact, I believe it's encoded in your DNA, but it's your responsibility to figure out what they are. Now, as mentioned, I never dreamed of being a writer, but as a result of all the work that I did, as a result of going within to discover who I really am, I awakened this amazing gift of writing, which I never knew I had. I never knew that I could be a public speaker. Didn't even cross my mind to be a speaker. But as a result of the journey that I've been on, I awakened this gift. And I also joined Toastmasters, and that's when I realized that I was really good at public speaking. And so waking up that gift really has allowed me to create what I'm calling an extraordinary life, because I get to share my unique gifts and talents with the world. Now, I believe that your purpose, and everyone has a purpose, you will find your purpose at the intersection of that which you love and are good at, and that which helps make the world a better place. So for example, I love writing and speaking, and I'm very good at it. And I take those gifts and talents to write books, to share with the world, to make the world a better place. Therefore, I am on purpose. And I feel this passion, and there's so much meaning and purpose in my life. And I'm driven by this inner desire to make the world better. Well, see, at the beginning, I said there's a divine intelligence in the universe. Well, see, I believe that intelligence is what's moving and expressing itself through me as me. And every human being has the capacity to tap into that divine intelligence within them. And that's what this is all about. So in closing, I'm going to say this. Every adversity in your life brings you a gift and a lesson. I'm absolutely certain of it. It may be difficult, it may be challenging, but this divine intelligence that I'm speaking of can only do one thing, and that is to love you. That's all it can do, is love you. This intelligence is literally love. You have access to that love, but you have to be willing to go on your own journey to connect to and then express the love that you are. So think about it. Appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity to share this message.
Thank you, Michael. Okay. Do you want to run through some of the questions?
So just like to say that was a great start, Michael. Really great story, and lots of key messages in there as well. I've been taking notes as I've been going along, and I've learned a lot from that as well. So thank you for that. We've had a few questions. Some of those that you've answered. One of the questions that I get asked often as well is, how do you actually find your purpose, which I think you've gone into to some degree. Another question that we had was, do you have any tips on how to build resilience within yourself?
Well, I believe resilience comes from knowing who you really are. And so when we do the inner work and remove the baggage that's keeping us from who we really are, resiliency is just part of who you are anyway. Because as human beings, as I mentioned, we all have this amazing capacity to deal with adversity if we're willing to tap into it. But we have to be willing to go a little deeper and ask ourselves those deeper questions. Now, I'm a huge advocate of inner child work from John Bradshaw, because again, I didn't have a clue as to who I was because I was hiding behind these masks of success. But when I started healing my heart, then everything started to open. So for me, I always recommend that people be willing to look at themselves and see if there's some unresolved trauma from your childhood that you haven't addressed. Because if you don't address those traumas, it will show up in your life in different ways.
Thank you, Michael. Another question. I think one of the things that you said is a lot of people, especially men, often are afraid to go to therapy. What advice would you give to somebody if they came to you and said to you that it's not for me, and you could clearly see that therapy is something they needed, and they said it's not for me. I don't need it. I don't need any help. I'm too, they're just not clearly just don't want to do it when it's something that you really know would benefit them. What advice would you give them to help persuade them to take that therapy?
Well, again, I think living by example is always the first key, because when I share my story, it gives men permission to recognize that they're not alone. See, as unfortunately for most of us as men, we feel isolated and alone, and we're unwilling to take the risk to be vulnerable and to share what society has told us is weakness, which is how we feel. We live in a culture that tells men that we aren't supposed to feel. And so for the man that is completely closed to the idea, there's nothing I can say that would ever change that. But by being open and vulnerable and sharing my story, it opens the door for men to go, well, maybe there's something to this. And so the advice would be, if you're the person who's closed-minded and don't want to change, just ask yourself honestly, how's your life really working out for you right now? Be really honest with yourself. Are you happy with your relationships? Are you happy with your income? Are you happy with your career? And it's interesting that as men, we don't really ask ourselves that question. Am I happy? You see, 25 years ago when I was married and living the so-called American dream, if someone would have asked me if I was happy, I would have said yes. But that was a lie. That was the mask I was hiding behind. So there's only two things that'll cause a person to change. One is pain, and the other is what I call divine discontent, which is just that internal feeling that we know something's just off. We may not have the words to explain it or describe it, but we just intuitively know something's off. Well, for most men, it isn't until they're in so much pain that they decide to change. My hope is that when people listen to my work and read my books, it alleviates some of that pain and it wakes them up a little sooner. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thanks, Michael. That was a great response. One last question before we move on. We have been impacted by many events over the last few weeks. If you could give one message to the many young people who are angry, frustrated, and tired right now, what would that be?
Well, the first message I want to give is to be optimistic. And I recognize that right now the world appears to be in total chaos. It just looks like that. But as mentioned, your beliefs about a thing creates your reality of the thing. So if we look at the world and we create a belief that yes, things can and will get better, it lays the foundation for us to change our mindsets. And when we change our mindsets, our experience changes. So the key is to disconnect from the negative media as much as you can, because the media is going to constantly fill your mind with images and stories of everything that's wrong with the world. But rest assured, there are a lot more things that are right with the world than are wrong with it. But it is your responsibility to focus your attention on that which is right so that you have the positive mental attitude that will move you into a more positive mindset.
Thank you, Michael. Again, great response. If anybody else has got any more questions, feel happy to put them in the message box and we'll ask them at the end. Just again, I'd like to say thank you to Michael. If everybody can just turn their microphones off again and give a big round of applause, because that was an amazing start to our event. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you. Sorry. Somebody speaking. Sorry. Thank you, Michael. That was as good if not better than the episode that we did, because again, similar to Jin, I've just literally wrote a book myself on some of the stuff that you said. And I just want to touch on the last point actually that you mentioned, which is the world looks like we're in a hell of a lot of chaos right now, especially myself. I almost got consumed into that environment in the last few weeks, and it's very heavy on your mind and on your heart. And I just love your spin on that, in terms of we can still see the light, we can still see the positive stuff, which is one of the reasons myself and Jim wanted to create this kind of event, where we can easily look on Twitter or on Facebook or wherever it is for the negative stuff in the world, but let's live with optimism. Let's live with hope for a better future. So thank you so much for obviously everything that you've said there. Hopefully you can stay till the end if there are any more questions for you, but you've got a lot of thank yous and a lot of people, I'm sure, who appreciate your words. So thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. And that brings us on to our next guest, who, again, like Michael, has a lot of wisdom. And just to give a backstory in relation to Bep came on my show, episode 14. So this was I was more anxious than when I met Michael on episode 40. I just about had the courage to do an episode through a microphone. And I remember being so nervous when Bep come on, because I always like to do a quick Google of who's coming on or understand somebody. And I remember actually cancelling on her twice. And I cancelled because I had a cold, and many people that know me, I've always got a cold, but I wanted it to be perfect. And I was chasing this thing of perfect, which is obviously elusive, but I was thinking I need to get it right. I don't want to mess this up. And we cancelled it a couple of times. But then when I did it, I found a gift. And Michael speaks about gift. I recognize for this journey, for my own journey of finding my own voice, I don't need to be the most eloquent speaker. In fact, I recognize my gift in this space is listening. And it was through hearing Bep's story that I was able to empathize with her. I was able to understand. And it's a story that she'll share, hopefully now, that resonated with me really, really closely. And from that, I started to see myself grow. So I'm eternally grateful for Bep coming on the show and sharing a story. I'm very grateful for her being here today. And yeah, over to you, Bep. I'm going to leave it there.
Thank you, Aaron. And I really just want to say thank you to you for making it all possible and for creating this, and echoing Michael's words as well, that every time I listen back to any of your podcasts, I get such a sense of you literally just absorb so much and then always pull out the really poignant points. And I just think that's an incredible gift to be able to do that and then share all of that. So thank you to you for what you're doing and the impact that you're making across the world, which is magnificent. So thank you for that. So, God, how do I follow that, Michael? I was literally in bits after listening to your podcast the first time round anyway. And yeah, I echo so much of your way of being and your advice to the listeners. And I suppose I'll jump straight in with elements of my story, because I think they'll illustrate some of the points that Michael's made. And I suppose I just want to start by saying that everybody has a story. Everybody has got a story. And we don't know what those chapters of our story are going to be when we start out in life. And my story has taken lots of twists and turns, and the chapters have been incredibly painful, not going to lie. And I'm actually not going to apologize if I cry, because I'm still processing some of the pain. But I also know that I've done this a few times now where I do a podcast. I've been really fortunate, and I do share. And I know, and this is what Michael said, that my vulnerability enables others to know that it's okay to be vulnerable. And I really hope that all of you today, if there are some things that you take away from this, please just know that it's okay to be vulnerable and to ask for help. Because every single one of my chapters has always had somebody else helping me. And that's been a big part of my growth. And so, yeah, I've got so many of my lovely friends and family on this today. So I'm really grateful to all of them as well. So my first key chapter in my life that really shaped me and really made me stop and assess who I was getting divorced. So, I, especially as an Asian girl, so in my family, I was probably, a few of the guys had been divorced, so maybe the older generation, but none of the girls. And and my parents were just the most amazing people, and are the most amazing people. And so I felt so much shame when I actually then, even though it wasn't an arranged marriage, I had chosen this guy. And so there was, I thought, because I had made this decision to marry this guy, I had made my bed, I had to lie in it. I wasn't really looking that divorce was even an option, partly because of the shame that I knew would come with it for the family. And so I stuck it out. But actually it was my parents that after about 7 or 8 years said to me, this can't go on. Like you are just destroying yourself in the process, and we don't want to see this anymore. And I'm so grateful, because I've heard so many stories since of how people don't have that support, and a lot of people suffer for most of their life actually in a relationship that just isn't, it's just taking from them, and you're never able to be the person that you really want to be. And so I was so grateful to my parents for standing by my side and saying, no, come on, this needs to change. And so they supported me, and I was able to step away from that marriage, even though it was incredibly hard, partly because, it wasn't easy to step away. So I didn't know what my life was going to look like. But what it really made me do was it stopped me in my tracks, and it made me really reassess who I was, because I didn't know who I was. And because I had always lived the life of what everybody else kind of almost expected me to do. And so I was probably early 30s, and I got to this place where I didn't know really who I was. And again, if you've heard Michael's podcast, he talks a lot about divine intervention. And honestly, I so feel we are guided. And I was leaving the gym one day, and there was a sign for a life coach. And I was like, oh, you know what? I do need some help. So I'm just going to give this lady a call. She was looking for some clients, as test cases. I called her, and our journey, because I knew that I wasn't really trying to fix what had happened or make peace with that, but I didn't know how to move forward. And that's why for me, it was coaching that was the way forward. And so what she enabled me to do was actually work out who I was by identifying what my values were. And it's one of those things, and Aaron and I talked about this on my podcast, that, I'm really lucky I had I've had a 20-year corporate career. So this kind of stuff does get presented to you, the opportunity to work out what your values are and things like that. But that hadn't really happened at that point. So I was able to do that with her, and then make decisions moving forwards in line with those values, and actually start finding my voice a little bit more, and actually ask myself, what is it that I actually want, as opposed to feeling that I had to do the right thing for everybody else. So she really helped me carve out who I was and what I wanted in my life, and how I could move forward, and all of this strength and resilience that I didn't know I had. And when you are tested, that's when you quite often find your gifts. But the thing that I really want to share, I suppose, about moving forward from a relationship that's broken down, and this only comes in hindsight, is that I've got no regrets. And this will be something that I weave through the rest of my story as well, is that, and I think Michael echoed this as well, that I would not be the person that I am now if I hadn't have gone through that experience. And people sometimes find it strange when I say that if I had to live my life over, I would marry him again, even though I knew it was a mistake, because it enabled me to shape who I have now become and the person I'm really proud of. So that was a big part for me in terms of, going through that process and carving out a future for myself. So then I had an amazing decade in my 30s. One of my cousins is on the call, and we spent a lot of time together having a lot of fun. So that was great. But I did want to get married, and I did want to settle down. And so I then got remarried. And again, this time, my husband had also been through a divorce. He was Indian as well. So we both kind of knew where we were coming from, but we both still had visions for the future. And so we got married, and then, I'm going to take some water. 18 months into our marriage, he got diagnosed with lymphoma. So that's the blood cancer, which totally rocked our world, because we didn't really have much experience of cancer in the family beforehand, firsthand. And, you know, we were just starting out. There were two families that had come together. All of a sudden, this bomb comes and hits in the middle of this. And it tested all of us. It literally broke us apart. But we all came together. And this is also what's really interesting. And I suppose another key point for me in my story is, as an Asian family, when cancer hits, you just duck and you hide and you don't share. And, you know, you literally just take cover and shy away from ever sharing any bad stuff. And that's what we did. And actually that had its benefits, because we were able to just focus on caring for my husband in the right way. And we didn't have to manage everybody else's feelings and emotions and anxiety around what was going on. You know, having been through the cancer journey or any level of adversity, you realize who steps up and who doesn't. And people sometimes that you expect to don't. And that can sometimes be, although it can hurt at the time, there's something about the fact that they don't know how to support somebody that typically maybe in the family is the person that they look to support them, or to be the one that shows the direction and things. So people don't know how to do this. And so that was a really big learning curve for us, in terms of, we only told our immediate family, and we really did just button down the hatches and try and get through it. And then I suppose, and we did, and we are so grateful that we got through it. So he responded really well to treatment. And although it was a horrendous journey, we came out the other side. And then when we were on holiday celebrating the end of his treatment and him going back to work, I found a lump in my breast, which again, just, you know, I could have said, oh gosh, no, this is totally unfair. And I didn't know how to deal with it at the time. And I've recently been asked, like, how did you deal with it? And I can honestly say there is no right or wrong, but you just feel numb. And you have to slow down, and you have to stop, and you have to literally just work out what is really important right now in terms of how you move forwards. And that was big for me. I have always been somebody that goes at 100 miles an hour, and I always look after everybody else. Like, I don't know what it's like to be the center of attention. It's never been something that I'm comfortable with. And so for me, it was like, okay, what does this now mean? And I just went into overdrive, I suppose, in terms of, okay, give me the plan, what do we need to do? What's first? Like, okay, so surgery, and then chemo, and then radio. And some of the lessons that I learned through that journey have literally enriched my life beyond belief. I remember saying at the time when I got diagnosed, I don't want to be known as the girl who had cancer, like in terms of in the family. So we really kept it private in the family. And we, you know, I managed to go and get the most amazing wig, and we didn't tell many people, and a lot of people didn't actually know. And actually it was better than my hair now, in that I had a good hair day every day. So there are some benefits to going through chemo as a girl. But what it really, the biggest lesson for me through that, because it felt really, well, other people thought it was really unfair, was that it gave me my wake-up call on knowing that I matter, because I hadn't realized that I matter before now, because I had served, or just thought my value in life was to serve others. Like my dad, you know, my dad was a big brother, and I did what he did. But it made me really realize that, oh gosh, do you know what? You can actually you can live the life you want to live as well. And it's not about everybody else, Bep. Like, learn to look after yourself and to put yourself first. And it made me realize that I matter. And if there is one thing that I now am so passionate about as a coach, is helping every single one of my clients to realize that they matter, and that you can live life on your terms in a way that enables you to grow and be the best version of yourself without the adversity, although the adversity shapes you like nothing has ever shaped me before. It made me stop. It made me really look in the mirror. And that, again, like Michael was saying, takes a lot of courage to look in the mirror and work out who you are and what your strengths are, and also elements of you that, you know, we can all have weaknesses and it is okay. We don't all have to be perfect. And so much I learned from that journey. And I remember saying to my husband, even, if you'd have been the only one in our relationship that had cancer, I would have put you on a pedestal for the rest of your life. But what this enabled me to do was to say, do you know what? I am equal, and we are going to navigate this together in terms of how we move forward. And it was really hard for him because he was still overcoming his journey, and then his wife's going through it. And I know that I put the mask on, you know, I was trying to protect my dad in particular, and I didn't know how to deal with it. And I wanted to still be Bep, and I wanted to be normal, and I was clinging on to any ounce of normality that we could get. And so, but so much came from some of those elements. And so one of, you know, when you think about some of like Michael shared some of his 5 top tips, I've got some top tips, but one of mine that really stands out is find your tribe. Find the people that are going to bring you sunshine and who are going to make you feel like sunshine. And I was really grateful to people that stood up and stood by my side through this, but didn't give me sympathy. They actually gave me courage. And one of them, and I know you're going to have Louise on soon, she's one of my best friends. And Louise was on maternity leave when I was diagnosed, and she was the one who I could literally just go and talk to about the weather, about telly, about all normal things. And we would just go and have tea and cake. She normalized, or she made me feel just still normal, because that's all you want. And somebody else asked me just recently, like, if I had a friend who was going through something similar, what would I do? And how do I do it? And how do you support? And it made me really stop and think. And I did think, actually, tell them what you need. But also, if you do have somebody going through this journey, ask them, like, you know, don't feel you have to fix it. Don't feel you can't take it away. You can't take the pain away. But just ask them, what is it that you need in this moment? And actually help them understand that you see them, you hear them, you acknowledge them. Because quite often through life, we can feel that we're just not seen and heard. And if you know, and Louise did that for me in terms of like just seeing me and hearing me. And, you know, and I think that's just such a beautiful gift. And then a friend of mine was sharing that one of their friends who went through something similar actually came up with a list of what they needed. So when they needed someone to go and have you know, some fun with, when they needed someone to cook them a meal, when they needed someone to take them to the hospital. And some of these elements are really important, to just take the time again to understand who you are, what your needs are, and then having the courage to ask for those needs to be met. Because the other thing I've realized, and having always been on the other side most of my life when trying to look after everybody, is people love, and I know how much pleasure I get from helping and supporting somebody, but people love to give as well. And I just haven't been good at receiving. And I'm really working hard on that now, allowing myself to receive the love and everything that's out there. And the other thing that Louise did for me through my cancer journey, which was really powerful, was she really challenged me on this secrecy side of things. And she didn't quite understand why we had to be secret about everything as a family. And she said, okay, I accept that, you know, you don't want to share, and that's fine. Because I think you're also missing out on how many people really love you and want to help you. And she said, but what if by sharing your story, you could help somebody? And that was the game changer for me. All of a sudden, when she said that and she spun it on its head, that's when I realized, gosh, if I can help somebody by sharing my story, then I am all over this. And I am like, just give me a microphone and let me do this. Because that is where I suddenly come into my own. And, you know, and I did do lots of talks with Macmillan, because they found our story, I think, quite interesting in terms of, you know, I was diagnosed pretty much a year to the day that my husband was diagnosed the year before. So, you know, sharing the story, I think, does help. And I think especially in the Asian community, being able to stand up and say, look, I've had it and I've come out the other side. Because I know when you're going through cancer, there's so much fear. And, you know, and now having lost people to cancer, I know where that fear comes from. But also, you do need to be surrounded by people that see or just can bring some light to you. But I know, you know, my husband and I are both incredibly grateful to the fact that we did come out the other side, and we don't take that for granted at all, because that's the other thing. When you're going through that journey and you have to face your mortality, you realize the small things are the big things. And we still actually now, you know, we really love just going for tea and cake, because there are times when he couldn't walk, you know, even 200 yards to go out sometimes, because his chemo was really severe. So we have never lost sight of how grateful we are to our bodies, how much we needed our minds to find our way through. And that spirit, like how you charge your spirit up with the right people and the right circumstances, that for me now, you know, time with people is the most precious thing. And I have become really clear on who my people are and where my time goes, and how I can share. And I suppose that's where, for me, my business has evolved into becoming a bit of a resilience coach, because there has been knock after knock after knock. And it's what I've realized is that the only way I can get through these things is by giving myself time to stop, to look in the mirror, to ask for help. So through both our cancer journeys, we both had counseling, so that we could go and face what we needed to face. And for me, it was facing my mortality, because that was something I couldn't discuss with my family and friends, because nobody wants to talk about the fact that you might die. And I needed to face that. I needed to work through what that looked like for me. And my counselor was the person that enabled me to have that conversation. And what that then unlocked for me was it took away the fear. And when you take away, or when you can find a way to face the fear or move past it, that's when I think your resilience really kicks in. But the other secret ingredient for me on resilience is self-compassion. And my internal voice now is so kind, so loving. And when I'm coaching people, a lot of people will say to me, oh no, but my internal voice is just so horrible and always bringing me down. And I'm like, yeah, and I've had to work on that. I never felt good enough. You know, I don't have a degree, and I let that hold me back so many times in terms of thinking I'm not good enough for this, that, and the other. And I've really had to push past a lot of that, those things that we typically all feel we need to have to be successful. And now I know it's my vulnerability that's my strength. I know it's who I am as a person that will bring the right people to me in terms of clients, in terms of some of the work that I get to do. And I am so grateful to how most of this has turned out. But also, if you're living your life to the best every possible day, or seeking that joy, finding that joy in that moment, then death isn't scary, because you are literally living to the max today, and you don't have the regrets. And when you can take away the biggest thing that we all fear, then you become resilient. You become able to step up and actually own who you are, and know who you are, and nurture who you are, and share who you are. And by sharing that light, other people feel able to shine their light. And that's the greatest gift. And I'm still navigating my purpose, but I know that I show up in my full vulnerability in whatever guise. And I for my local Cancer Alliance, I am the patient and carer voice, because I've played both roles. And I am so passionate about helping people have that voice, because it's such a scary road to be on, and you lose all control. And if there's one way of taking back control of just the small things sometimes, then, you know, finding a way to do that is what I've really felt compelled to do, and to help others find theirs. I don't know where I'm at on time now. Have I got more time? Have I got questions?
I think there's quite a few questions. Jin,
Okay.
do you want to do the questions?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you myself. It was really nice of you to show your vulnerability, and I think it's so important. And that's what we're trying to create here. We want people to show their vulnerability, to show that to others as well that it's okay to be vulnerable and show your vulnerabilities too. So I've got quite a few questions. Sorry.
Michael had the first one.
Okay, so Michael asked, how do you find your tribe? How do you find the right tribe for you?
Actually, by being maybe a little bit vulnerable and seeing who shows up, because some people will step away and some will literally come with bells on. But also it's knowing, so for me now as I move forward, it's knowing what I need. So I've gotten to know what I need. And actually my two biggest tribe members are my two nephews who are 4 and 7. Like the light that those guys bring is incredible. And they charge me up like nobody else can. And they help me just bring play to the fore, and ground me. And so don't be surprised about who you have in your tribe. It can be people that you've known for your whole life. It can be people that you've met in the last year. So just be open to who it might be and don't be surprised by who it might be. But I honestly believe that these people just come to you. And I know that I nurture my relationships really strongly. And so I've got some key members that are my regular tribe members. But I hope that helps.
Jin, you're on mute.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, another question that was asked is, what are your top tips for someone that always focuses on others and cares for others, but forgets to focus on themselves?
Yeah, this is something that I've had to work really hard on, and cancer made me do it. And I would say you can't pour from an empty cup. And I know that if I'm not looking after myself, I now do not, a lot of women in particular feel guilt if they take time for themselves over looking after their family. And I can honestly say that everybody benefits if you take time for yourself. And it's something that you've got to work on for yourself and give yourself permission to do that, to just, even if it is literally 20 minutes a day, where you focus on yourself and do whatever you need, just your time to listen to something, watch something, speak to somebody, whatever it is, that everybody else benefits when you take the time to do that. And I'm doing a lot of work in women's groups at the moment where I am literally holding these women to account and saying, okay, what are you doing for yourself? Because it has to start with some self-compassion. We've got so much more to give when we have given ourselves some self-compassion.
Jin, when you saw that microphone out, my friend.
He's forgetting, sorry. Yeah, okay. Another question that was asked by Michael is, does meditation play a part in your healing process?
Yeah, I want to get better at meditation and make that a regular. I do it every day. I don't do it fully, and that is a practice. So I'm going to be honest with that one and say I am working on it. I do pray, and so that can be another way of meditating for me. But actually mindfulness. I do a lot more mindfulness than I do meditation. So just be very present in the moment. If I'm out and about for a walk or anything like that, that's what I do.
Okay, final question. There's a lot of communities out there, Asian community, Caribbean community, that try to keep a lot of what's happening in their lives private, and they don't reach out for help, especially with things that are difficulties in their life and adversities. What would you say to help those types of communities to learn to talk about their feelings or what's going on inside their homes more?
I think the first thing to acknowledge is that there is no shame attached to any of this stuff. And we're all vulnerable. We all need support and help. And actually by being open about it, you sometimes move through this stuff quicker. And if you can help somebody else through it, then that also just, you know, for us in the Sikh community, it's seva, it's being of service to others. And that's what I've really had to learn to reframe, is by me sharing, it can make other people feel uncomfortable. But I'm really hoping my generation and younger generations, like, you know, some of the work that you're doing, Aaron, and you, Jen, like you're working with the kids and teens and men and all of this kind of stuff. We're facing into this stuff now, and we just need to walk past some of that stuff. And, you know, and I don't know that my parents really knew about how much I'm sharing. But they know that I'm making a difference for other people. And I think that is the piece that has helped, I think. So I'm hoping generationally it's going to get better, but to really notice that there is no shame in being vulnerable and honest about what's going on.
Thank you, Bep. If anybody else got any more questions, if you can ask at the end in the comments box. Again, Bep, if you could just put it on the gallery view so you can see everybody, if everybody can turn their cameras off, give her a big round of applause, because that was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Bep. All right, thank you. Thank you so much for that, Bep. Thank you for sharing your story again. Apologies, there's an echo. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm getting an echo. Yeah, thank you, Bep. So episode 14 was the episode with Bep. I just want to quickly touch on a few things in relation to that. I'm hearing a massive echo. I do apologize. Can everyone hear me okay? Or was it just in my ears?
A slight echo.
There is an echo, isn't there? Right. That's strange. I haven't done anything. Right, okay. Is that any better?
Slightly, yeah.
Right, let me try that. Apologies. So just very quickly, if everyone can hear me okay, otherwise I'm going to have to pass it over to you, Jen, is find who you are, find your tribe. And obviously, I think the most important thing that Bep mentioned was that you matter. I think that is so important. And this is something that I really try and push in, find your voice, whether we grow through life. And so often we think we have to do certain things because somebody's told us to do that, or our parents or our teachers, for example. And it really is about finding yourself and finding your voice. So I think that demonstrates that better than anybody else.
Don't touch things like that.
I want to move over to Kathy, and I think we've got somebody's live house at the minute, so I'm just going to try and mute that if I can find them. Not sure where that's coming from. Somebody's house is on show, by the way, so you're live on Find Your Voice.
You've got Kuldeep Singh. He's not on
that's my
mute.
dad, so he's trying to join the show. So, Dad, if you wouldn't mind just tuning out ever so slightly, which might explain the echo. So, is he? I might have to throw him out. Apologies. I can't find him. All right. Talk about adversity.
Aaron, that's fine now.
Okay, is that okay? Yeah. Okay, brilliant. So, last but by no means least, I want to welcome Kathy. Now, Kathy and I have become very, very good friends on Instagram. She's almost become like my best buddy, and she's helped me so much with me understanding myself. So, one of the things I try and do is share my vulnerabilities. And I recently recognized there's a title for something about me, which is called Empath. And she really tried to help me understand why I am the way I am. So she's, bless her, had to listen to me through voice notes, understanding why I get so emotional and why I literally do some things that I used to think were weird, especially as a guy. So thank you, Kathy, obviously, for that. But Kathy's story, if you haven't already heard it, is episode number 32. And it's such an important episode that I recommend anyone who's been through similar stories to Michael or Bep goes back and listens to. It's about overcoming and healing from trauma, childhood trauma, which obviously she can, if she chooses to, share that with yourselves shortly. But more importantly, she's taught me just important things in life. And the stuff, I suppose, which I hope you've all seen from this episode so far, is just hope, compassion, love, kindness, all of the things that we're all really striving for. Yet sometimes we don't have the courage to go out and say. So Kathy, thank you for coming on. Apologies for the echo if it's still going on and it's gone a little bit over, but it's a pleasure to have you here from the other side of Texas. So now over to Kathy.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I thought it would be a good idea to go last, but now I am totally regretting going after these amazing speakers. But I want to thank Aaron and Jen for having me on. This has been an amazing experience, but also I just wanted to thank you, Aaron, because when you asked me originally to come on the podcast, I had no idea, what I was going to say, what I would even talk about, because sometimes we don't realize the importance of sharing our story. And I didn't even know that my story needed a voice. So I'm a little nervous, so my voice will be a little shaky, but we don't realize that our story needs a voice until we express that and get it out. And before the podcast, I hadn't really shared it in detail, and I still haven't. But that was really a turning point for me. So that was been about a year ago. So thank you again for giving me a voice and helping me find my voice. It's just been an amazing experience. So I do want to start with, anytime I start talking about my story, I always start with my dad. Because my dad was someone that really taught me so much about being what we talked about, empathic and compassionate. He was also very resilient in his life. So I learned a lot from him. As I shared on the podcast, my dad got polio when he was about 6 months old. So being raised by someone that is considered handicapped, there was a lot of difficulties that we had to go through, but we didn't really realize it at the time. So there were a lot of things that he had to overcome. And also just being raised by someone that wasn't able to do a lot of the things that a normal parent would do. Sometimes people were cruel, making fun. But he never complained. He never ever talked about feeling sorry for himself. He never questioned, at least not to us, why he sort of got dealt the cards that he did. So I always go back to him because he's really been my teacher in this life. So I just want to start there, but sorry, I do think that, my story sadly is not uncommon. A lot of people have experienced what I have. So I don't think that my story is unique in the fact that the sexual abuse, started very early, as far as I can remember. So I want to say about 3 years old. And also, there was a couple of things going on at the time. Like I said, I was sexually abused from a very early age, but I also, I was listening to Michael talk about our purpose and our gift, and we have these gifts coming into this lifetime or coming into this world. I was also always very sensitive to what people would consider the other side, or being very psychic as a child. And so those were the two things I had to deal with. So, I didn't feel like I was a normal child. I didn't have a normal life. So being sexually abused by my paternal grandfather from the time I was 3 to about 12, 13, that age. And then having this other ability, which I didn't feel was an ability at the time, just really left me feeling very isolated, feeling very different, feeling very, very strange. So it took me a long time to put the pieces together. You don't realize what your journey is, or the breadcrumbs that are left out. You just kind of follow it, and sometimes you don't realize that they do have a purpose. You just don't know what that is until you get through that journey. So there was a lot of ups and downs within my life. Bep mentioned being married. I was married in my first marriage. I married somebody that was pretty abusive, both mentally and physically. So there was a lot of little things throughout my life that I felt, I always, in the back of my mind, knew that my life wasn't always going to be that way. I just didn't know how I was going to get through it, So then, it took me a while to even talk about the abuse. And I think when I was about, I feel like I'm jumping around, but when I was about 12, I opened up to my best friend, which she was a child as well. And so telling her, she was the one that actually went and told a school counselor. And if she hadn't have done that, I don't think I would have ever gotten the help that I did. So I'm super thankful for her. She's been my best friend ever since. And so that was really the first step in expressing what had happened to me as a child. So that, and then of course, like I said, going on to an abusive marriage and just not really understanding like my purpose and, you know, what was it? I didn't know what I was doing with my life, basically. So then after that, just, I met my husband, who's my current husband, who's an amazing person. And I finally thought, you know, the pieces of my life are coming together. I met this amazing person and I'm happy and I'm getting ready to start this amazing business, which I thought was my goal and my passion. You know, we invested money and we started, and it was just an amazing thing. And then the market crashed. And so we basically had to close that, you know, and, you know, I basically, you know, we go into bankruptcy. I think, you know, I'm going to lose my house. And, you know, in those moments, you become desperate for answers. You don't know what you're going to do. So I thought, well, maybe we should get divorced so this won't affect him. You know, you just don't know what to do. And then, you know, I find out that my father is basically diagnosed with a terminal illness. So, and now looking back, you know, I'm just so thankful that that business did not survive, because I wouldn't have had the opportunity to care for my dad. I wouldn't have had the opportunity to spend every single day with him for the moments that he had. You know, it was difficult. We lost a lot of money. We thought, you know, like I said, we thought we were going to lose our house. We thought my husband would lose his job. But looking back, that was pretty much the best gift I could have received at that time. Because if you know, most people have businesses, you know how much time and effort it takes, and I wouldn't have had that energy to take care of my father. So, like I said, I'm thankful now that that didn't work out. And so just, you know, when you're walking someone through the death process, that can be the most transformative experience that you can have, because then you're confronted with, you know, you're about to physically lose your best friend, who I considered my dad was my best friend. And then it's also bringing your own mortality to the forefront, you know, and just realizing what is important in life. And so after that, you know, I made a promise to my dad that I would get help with not only losing him, but also being confronted with the sexual abuse, because for so long, I think I lived my life thinking that I was okay, thinking that nothing was wrong, you know, and like I said, I always thought, well, so many people go through this, so many people have had to deal with this, you know, so I thought, you know, I'm just gonna be okay, and I kept telling myself I was gonna be okay. But then being confronted with my dad's death and losing our business really just brought all that emotional stuff up to the forefront, you know. And so, like I said, I just promised my father that I would eventually get help for that, and I did. You know, I tried I think I tried therapy. I tried just different modalities. And then I was just led into a spiritual practice, which I think was really the melding of where I was as a child, you know, having this realization that I had a connection to people on the other side, and always knowing things that other people didn't know. So I think, you know, like Bep said, we're always divinely guided. I just don't think we realize it in those moments. So for some people, healing looks a certain way, like maybe that is therapy, or maybe that is medication. There's different ways to heal. Mine just happened to take more of a spiritual, kind of a spiritual path. So again, my friend who has been with me through this whole time, you know, she was the one that told me I should come to this spiritual meditation circle. And I show up. I had no idea what it was, and she didn't even show up. So I thought, how'd you invite me and then just not show up, you know? And I wanted to leave. I was so uncomfortable. It just seemed like the weirdest thing I've ever experienced. You know, everybody was like sitting in, you know, lotus position. I'd never done meditation. I didn't know what I was doing there. And it was my first experience with really a spiritual healing practice. And so that was really what started my journey into healing. That gave me the permission to let my body release what was going on, because I had so much physical pain in my body. I dealt with a lot of self-hatred. So anytime anything went wrong in my life, or anytime, you know, people were rude to me, or I felt like I wouldn't be, you know, I wasn't successful, I would always take it out on myself, whether it would be how I looked or how I felt. You know, I hated myself. And so my husband would constantly tell me, you know, you're not ugly, something ugly happened to you. And that was really the first time that clicked in my head, you know, because for so long, like I said, anytime something went wrong, I started to hate myself. And really, I took it out on my looks for some reason, my self-image. I couldn't look in a mirror for so long. I just hated everything about myself. So putting those pieces together and going along the spiritual path really allowed me to not only release that subconsciously, but release that from my physical body. And so really now that led me into the work that I do now, which is energy healing. And it really gave me permission to also talk about the mediumship and talk about the fact that I have always had this connection, because I was also raised in sort of a conservative religious household where, you know, we didn't talk about those things. Those things were always somewhat evil, or, you know, they're somewhat misunderstood. So I always felt so strange, you know, having this connection and then this, you know, secret of being sexually abused. It was just this combination of a couple of things. But so now that really just kind of led me into what I do now. And like I said, being that I am quote unquote psychic, you know, I don't really like that word, but if I could break that down, you know, psychic just comes from the word psyche, which means soul. So when someone is reading someone's energy, or we are tapping into that, we're just really reading the soul of that person. So now a lot of times when I am working on people, I can pretty much, you know, when I'm touching them, I can feel, I can sense, and I'll know what their physical blocks are. Sometimes I'm given information as far as how that started, because sometimes that does, it's very, you know, it starts in our energy field. And then a lot of times we can manifest that into physical pain. And so putting all those pieces together, now I understand a lot about myself, or I understand my journey and why I had to walk this path, you know. And so now my passion is just really helping people to understand that sometimes healing does take on different journeys, different modalities. It doesn't have to be in a box, you know. For some people, like Michael talked about meditation, I credit meditation for really everything that I'm doing now, because my meditation practice is the one thing that I don't ever deviate from. You know, I meditate twice a day. It's really helped me to understand myself and just quiet, you know, what we would consider that monkey mind, so that you can hear that guidance, you know, like Bep said, again, you know, that we are divinely guided. So if you're not quieting that mind, you're not going to hear that guidance. You're not going to receive those signs. You're not going to recognize them if your mind is in overdrive. So that is really what really brought me to this path. And so now, like I said, my passion is just normalizing conversations around sexual abuse, normalizing conversations around death, normalizing conversations around the afterlife, and things that sometimes we don't have the words to express, or sometimes people don't understand. And just letting people know that, you know, we're capable of healing from so much. And a lot of times we don't give ourselves credit for things that we've had to walk through, or we don't give ourselves enough grace for our journeys, because, you know, like Bep said, we all have a story, and sometimes those are very difficult to bring to words. But that's really been my passion. And I like to keep spirituality very simple for people. So, you know, in all the videos I make on Instagram or, you know, Facebook, I try to break it down as simply as I can, because there were so many times where I didn't understand. You know, I would go to teachers and try to understand spirituality, and I don't think that there's, you know, there's not one way to go about it, but there was so many things that I didn't understand. So I tried to break it down in the best of my ability to what I understand now at this point in my life. So just a couple of tips that I think are very simple. And I tell every single person that comes to see me, meditation and journaling. Those are two of the most powerful things I think you can do. Meditation, even if it's just for 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes at night. And journaling, just really there's something about taking a pen and paper and getting that energy out. You know, people ask if they can type it. And for me, it's paper and pen. It's just allowing yourself to express yourself, you know, whatever you're grateful for, whatever you want to manifest in your life, all those feelings, you know, because no one's grading you, no one's looking over your shoulder, no one's going to read it, hopefully. So those are the tips that I have. They're very simple. And, you know, when people come back to me, they ask me again, and I always say the same two things. It's meditation and journaling. It's very, very simple. But those are the things that helped me. So that, you know, that's my story. That's all I have to share. And I feel like I jumped around a lot. You know, I'm not a speaker. I'm also not a coach. So I just wanted to express it in the best way that I can. So thank you for having me. And sorry if that was a little confusing, but just trying to piece it all together.
That's absolutely fine. Jin, I think you're on mute.
That was amazing, Kathy. I think you did great. I think you told the story perfectly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. One of the things I've got from a lot of the guests that have come on today, and I hear from a lot of people, is sometimes they say things always happen for a reason. Do you believe things happen for a reason, or do you think sometimes we find a reason for the things that happen to us?
I think it can be a combination of both, actually. I think that as humans, we try to understand and make sense of everything because that's our human nature. We want to understand. And definitely there are things that don't have sort of in our mind at the time of purpose. But I think part of it and part of healing is things that happen using that to really help someone else, because that's really what we're all doing, right? We're all helping each other basically walk through this life together, you know, and we're all serving each other in some capacity. So I think that our purpose and our reason is just to find that purpose and help each other out.
Thank you. When did you first discover your gift, and can you remember that very moment when you realized that you had this gift?
Like I said, very early on, so around 4 or 5 years old, I would, you know, like my mom would say, I would, you know, like I would say, oh, the phone's ringing, and note and say who it is, and she said, oh, well, the phone's not ringing, and then a minute later, that person would call. I had a near-death experience when I was about 5 or 6 years old, where I actually saw myself leave my body. So very early on, I would, 4 or 5, I'll just leave it at that because I could go on and on.
Jin, Mike.
Again, sorry, keep forgetting. Okay, so just got another question coming. Do you view trauma as a physical entity that we carry within us, or is it within the mind's thought?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Sorry, do you view trauma as a physical entity that we carry within us, or is it a mind thought?
I don't understand the question completely, but I don't think that it's an entity. No, I don't think that.
Okay. What tips do you have to take the pressure off yourself?
The tips that I have to take, you know, again, I think it sounds so simple, but there's something about meditation that really helps to rewire your brain. So whether you're going through, you know, like a physical ailment or an emotional trauma, or like for me, it was, you know, the self-hatred and all those kind of things that manifested into a physical issue. I think meditation really just gives your mind that time to take a break, so that when you are having those thoughts or later on in your day, you can go back to that feeling of peace. It's not easy, and it takes time and consistency, you know, like I tell people all the time, you know, let's say you're going to run a marathon, right? Well, you're not going to run a marathon by running 3 miles one day and then show up to the marathon. It just doesn't happen. But if you make that time each day, it can be very healing and help with that.
Thank you. Final question. For a lot of us, and I've myself at times have struggled to meditate. Do you have any top tips on, for somebody that's new to meditation, how the best practices on how to get into meditation and do meditation?
I think the best thing to keep in mind is that meditation doesn't have to look like one thing. It does not have to be where you're sitting, like I said, in lotus position, or, you know, it doesn't have to be this big production. If you could just take 5 minutes, even if it's in the shower, right? Just feeling that water cleanse your body can be meditative. But if someone really wants to, you know, make meditation a consistent practice, I would really recommend listening to a guided meditation. There are lots of guided meditations that are like 5 minutes long. That would be the first step. I think it does take time to sit there. And I think a lot of times we think, oh, we have to stop our thoughts or we have to control what's going on. And that's absolutely not true. You're not going to be able to just stop thinking. And a lot of times, you know, sometimes I don't want to do it. I really don't want to do it, but just making that time and making a date with yourself every day, even if it means you have to wake up 5 minutes early, don't leave your bed until you meditate for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Nearly forgot to set myself off mute again. I think I'll have to remind myself, put a post-it note on my head or something for next time. With that, I'd like to say thank you again. Can you all take off your microphones off or mute and give a big round of applause again, Beppy?
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I'd like to hand over to Aaron.
Thank you. I'm just going to mute everybody. So I think we pretty much answered all the questions, which is good. Let me just mute Courtney, just in case. Right, okay, I think everyone's muted. Yeah, fantastic. So thank you, Kathy, for sharing that story.
Thank you.
No pressure at all. You're a little bit like myself. I'm not a natural speaker myself, so I jump around, and I do that in all of my episodes. But I think everyone saw your story there. And what's been great for me personally, and this is why I say we've become really good friends over Instagram, is when you came on my show, even speaking about the stuff that you're doing, it was kind of like, should I not? And since then, you really kind of found your voice, to use the cliche. And it's been so nice seeing that. And that's one of the best, I think, gifts that I can give the world, is when somebody comes on the show, just to maybe just see myself as well. If he can just talk about something and it can inspire someone, maybe my story is important as well. And to see you do that and then shine a light and then obviously help me with so much stuff as well, is fantastic. Other than that, I didn't really have anything else planned for a kind of exit here, other than just a few thank yous. And sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, thank you to Michael, who sadly had to just leave us 5 minutes ago, Kathy from Texas, and Bep as well. Without you guys, this wouldn't have been possible. And obviously my co-host, Jen Atwell, as well, who actually made this experience more fun and a lot more enjoyable, because I was so anxious and so nervous, especially going live and stuff, and just having his support there, just saying, we'll get through it together. It's been heartfelt. But more importantly, for everyone who's taken time out of their day on a Sunday to come on for 2 hours, I just hope that in what we're going through, that we take a few lessons away, such as adversity can be our biggest gift if we allow it to be. Again, it's all perspective, and we can obviously find power in sharing our stories. So I encourage everyone to share their stories. I think shame came up quite a lot. So if anyone's dealing with anything like that, you've got two prime examples here, and even Bep's story to some degree as well, where we have to overcome that in order to truly find ourselves. And it requires a lot of work. And this is one thing I try and do, and I know Jin does this fantastically as well, is we try and tell you who we are, and then we try and be almost like leading from the front to show you guys, look, this is what we're trying, this is who we want to become, and this is our vulnerabilities. And hopefully that gives you all the courage to say, I'm struggling, especially as guys. You know, I always try and advocate that I'll put my hand up straight away when I struggle. So that's kind of all I wanted to say. I want to just pass it over to Jin, obviously, if he's got any last words. But sincerely, from everyone else, thank you so much for making this special. It went 100 times better than I thought it was. And we only had like my dad interrupting for a little bit, which was a bit random anyway. Over to you, Jin, if you want to say any final words.
Thank you, Aaron. I'd personally like to say thank you to Aaron. I know he doesn't like this, but thank you, Aaron. I know you've set this up. You created Find Your Voice, and you've helped a lot of people find their voice. So I'd say personally like to say thank you. So can everybody give a big round of applause to Aaron? Oh, you can take yourselves off mute.
I was not expecting that.
Just embarrassed you then, Aaron. Thank you, everybody. I'd just like to say thank you to everybody that's donated as well. We've raised over £160 for Young Minds. So that's great. That's great as well. Thank you to all the guests. You're all amazing. You all shared your stories, which is really brave. And we really appreciate that. And I think everybody else appreciates that really as well. It helps a lot of people out there find their voice as well and talk about their vulnerabilities. So thank you very much. Again, everybody else can everybody give a big round of applause to all our guests tonight. Thank you. So, I hope you've all enjoyed the event. It's been a great experience for me too. A lot of learning going on, and hopefully we can bring this event to you again in a month's time with some new guests. If you've got any feedback, anything you'd like us to do differently, anything you'd like to see on our show, just let us know. And again, thank you everybody for joining us tonight and spending that time in your evenings to watch this show. And we'll catch you soon. Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Look after yourselves.